Profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. Today we will speak about the Shurangama Sutra. Just now, because the female practitioners here received an empowerment today, we were delayed for a little bit. This couldn't be helped, but it is certainly worthwhile. In order to seek the Dharma, everyone should be willing to make an effort. Sometimes being a little tired or enduring a little hardship can help purify our karma. Recently, the monastery in our hometown just completed an empowerment and transmission. During that period of over a week, an elderly Khenpo of ours who is about to turn 97, from 6 in the morning until 9 at night every day, continuously listened to this empowerment and transmission. Generally speaking, when we reach 97 years old, sitting from 6 in the morning until 9 at night is something many people might not be able to endure. But this also demonstrates the value of the Dharma. When all of you sitting here reach 96, if there is a teaching to listen to continuously without interruption, I wonder if you could do the same. Therefore, whether it is listening to a transmission or receiving tantric teachings, everyone should value it highly. Today we will continue to speak about the last of the 25 great disciples, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva's perfect penetration through the ear faculty. This is the final one because the state of realization achieved by Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva is also exceptionally high. We will not be able to finish this chapter this year. I plan to cover the 32 responsive manifestations of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva today, and after that we will temporarily conclude. We can take a temporary pause here. So today also serves as a very auspicious connection. Everyone should make the aspiration. Just as Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva liberates sentient beings, I shall also liberate sentient beings in the same way. Whatever wisdom and compassion Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva possesses, may I also fully possess the exact same wisdom and compassion. In our hearts, each one of us should silently make this aspiration. In fact, as we discussed previously, when the 25 disciples each shared their own causes and conditions for realization, everyone understood that if we make diligent efforts through various methods, one day the causes and conditions for our realization will mature. Furthermore, regarding others' different practices and different Dharma doors, we absolutely must not give rise to wrong views or slander them. You might think a certain method is not very good, but in fact others truly rely on such Dharma doors to attain realization as well. So if we have the opportunity in the future to study the 84 Mahasiddhas, actually the 84 Mahasiddhas also employed a wide variety of very mysterious methods to attain realization. When the chance arises, we should also study them a bit. Among the 84 Mahasiddhas of India, some truly attained realization while making clothes, and some did so while doing various things that seem even more mundane than what we do today. Yet through these very acts, they all attained realization. Therefore everyone, after learning about the manifestations of realization of the 25 great disciples, should develop pure perception. This is very important. Actually, in every commentary on the Shurangama Sutra, each great master explains it in a different way. Sometimes it is not like our middle way and Buddhist logic. For the middle way and Buddhist logic, the explanations from many great masters are fundamentally the same. But when we look at the Shurangama Sutra, the early masters and the later masters all have different methods of interpretation. So if we were to explain it extensively, for example, what Master Tongli's view is, what Master Changshui's view is, what Master Jiaoguang's view is, what Master Oyi's view is, as well as contemporary masters like Venerable Master Xuanhua and Master Yuanying, and many others, including Nanhuai Qin. They have many different methods of interpretation. I have briefly reviewed some of them, but in truth, based on each Dharma master's own understanding, the Shurangama Sutra indeed has many different ways of being explained. So today, I will just provide a simple introduction based on the literal meaning. Then the Bodhisattva who hears the cries of the world stood up, bowed at the Buddha's feet, and said to him respectfully, "World-honored one, I can recall the time when, as many eons ago as there are sand grains in the river Ganges, a Buddha named He who hears the cries of the world was in this world." This means Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva stood up from his seat, bowed down at the Buddha's feet, and respectfully said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, I now remember very clearly that countless eons ago, as numerous as the sand grains in the Ganges, there was a Buddha who appeared in the world. This Buddha's name, his title, was He who hears the cries of the world. The name of the Buddha he relied upon at that time was also He who hears the cries of the world. Before this Buddha I made the resolution to become fully awakened, and he instructed me to enter Samadhi through a practice of hearing and contemplating. At that time before this Buddha, I generated the Supreme Mahayana Bodhicitta. This Buddha, the Buddha, He who hears the cries of the world, taught me to enter Samadhi, starting from hearing, contemplating and practicing. So regarding hearing, contemplating and practicing here, of course in a broad sense, it refers to what we currently call the hearing, contemplating and practicing that we often speak of. But in this context what he calls hearing means the inner ear faculty does not chase after and does not follow external sound dust. Directly realizing the true nature of hearing right in the moment, this is hearing. Then, after hearing, taking the principles heard and contemplating them to manifest awareness, this kind of wisdom is called contemplating. As for practicing, all the wisdom from hearing and wisdom from contemplating ultimately return to the true mind. This is called practicing. Through such a method, one enters Samadhi. Therefore, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva's hearing, contemplating and practicing here, compared to what we usually talk about, still has a slight difference. For the hearing mentioned here, one must actually find this wisdom of hearing. When the wisdom of hearing is found, the essence of that wisdom has nothing to be heard. This will be explained below. I began with a practice based on the enlightened nature of hearing. First I redirected my hearing inward in order to enter the current of the sages. Then external sounds disappeared. Here he says, at the very beginning, when hearing in front of the thus come one, this hearing actually enters into the authentic true mind, which is what we call the wondrous, enlightened, fundamental purity of the Tathagata Garbha, into the essence that is unarising, unceasing, pure and undefiled. Therefore, this kind of hearing is not just simply listening to a sound and being done with it. It truly enters the right path, enters into the true mind. When it enters the true mind, then external sounds disappeared. All external so-called sound dust, and what is heard vanish. What is heard is completely gone, because when you contemplate inwardly, you simply cannot find any external dust. Next he explains this in several stages. This explanation is a bit different, but it can also be understood this way. With the direction of my hearing reversed, and with sounds stilled, both sounds and silence cease to arise. At the very beginning, when we observe this Dharma that we hear, its essence is completely still. Then the sound that serves as the object of hearing consists of the two dusts of movement and stillness. Movement refers to the fluctuating sounds one hears, and there are also the sounds of stillness. These two marks actually cease to arise. They fundamentally neither arise nor cease. Actually, this breaks through the aggregate of form. Here some commentaries correspond this to the 5 aggregates and the 5 turbidities. This step transcends the turbidity of time. This is the first, then the second. So it was that, as I gradually progressed, what I heard and my awareness of what I heard came to an end. As this state continuously, as his Samadhi power continuously increases, both the subject hearing and the object heard, the wisdom capable of hearing and the external mark being heard, these two are simultaneously transcended and simultaneously extinguished. Neither subject nor object exists. In the previous stage, movement and stillness cease to exist. Now here, both the subject hearing and object heard are extinguished. This breaks through the aggregate of feeling and transcends the turbidity of views. This is the second stage. Then the third stage, even when that state of mind in which everything had come to an end disappeared, I did not rest. My awareness and the objects of my awareness were emptied. When hearing no longer exists and one does not dwell on it, then the awareness that cognizes it, along with the object of awareness, the subject awareness and object of awareness are also completely empty and unobtainable. The awareness that knows this hearing and the cognition, or rather both subject awareness and object of awareness, are gone. This breaks through the aggregate of perception and transcends the turbidity of afflictions. Then the fourth stage, when that process of emptying my awareness was wholly complete, then even that emptying and what had been emptied vanished. This means, because previously awareness became empty, and both awareness and the subject of awareness became empty. Now this emptiness and awareness are perfectly complete and intrinsically pure. In this way, both the subjective emptying and the object emptied are extinguished. Therefore, emptiness itself also does not exist. This breaks through the aggregate of mental formations and transcends the turbidity of sentient beings. Coming into being and ceasing to be themselves cease to be. Then the ultimate stillness was revealed. At this point, ultimately, both emptying and what is emptied are also extinguished. So arising and ceasing do not exist. When there is no arising and ceasing, this is the true manifestation of ultimate stillness. This is able to break through the aggregate of consciousness, breaking through the aggregate of consciousness among the five aggregates, and transcending the turbidity of life among the five turbidities. Therefore, this method of observation is basically what we often discuss in the middle way. Appearance is emptiness, then the union of appearance and emptiness. The union is freedom from elaboration, and freedom from elaboration is ultimately ascertained as equality. The middle way's four-step observation method is also quite similar. Here, he observes starting from hearing up to awareness, awareness becoming empty, and finally emptiness manifesting without any arising or ceasing. Actually, when ultimate stillness is finally revealed, this should be the highest state of a bodhisattva. Here it says that Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, through the ear faculty, attained it through the ear faculty. Before the Buddha, he who hears the cries of the world, he had already attained this most transcendent state. It is not just about our ears hearing something, and leaving it at that. It is not like that. He truly heard sound, and completely understood its most profound and secret truth. Having understood it, he transcended all the so-called five turbidities, and broke through the five aggregates, attaining the highest state. All of a sudden I transcended the worlds of ordinary beings, and I also transcended the worlds of beings who have transcended the ordinary worlds. Everything in the 10 directions was fully illuminated, and I gained two remarkable powers. At this point he suddenly transcended the ordinary worlds and the transcendent worlds, entering the state of full illumination in the 10 directions. Moreover, he obtained two remarkable powers. What are these two remarkable powers? This is explained next. First, my mind ascended to unite with the fundamental wondrous enlightened mind of all Buddhas in all 10 directions, and my power of compassion became the same as theirs. Second, my mind descended to unite with all beings of the 6 destinies in all 10 directions, such that I felt their sorrows and their prayerful yearnings as my own. These two are the two remarkable powers just mentioned. The first is ascending to unite with the enlightened wisdom of all Buddhas in the 10 directions, because Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Upon attaining this state, looking upward is equal to the wondrous enlightened wisdom of all Buddhas of the 10 directions and 3 times, and possesses objectless loving-kindness. Looking downward, he unites with all beings of the 6 destinies in the 10 directions, and with them his compassion for all beings of the 6 destinies is united with them. He can fully be described as having great compassion of the same body, or objectless compassion. Normally, when we have a certain level of realization, if we delight in the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, we might not necessarily delight in the sentient beings below. If we are particularly attached to liberating sentient beings below, it might be that we do not necessarily delight in the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. We still have some grasping at true existence, so we might not be joyful in both. But Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, in fact, as we say, seeks Buddhahood above and liberates sentient beings below. Above, he is of the same body as the loving kindness and wisdom of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And below, whether it is the Tathagatagarbha of the beings in the 6 destinies, or the compassion of the beings in the 6 destinies, he can be of the same body as them in compassion. If we had such compassion of the same body, when we see a sentient being suffering, we would immediately feel a connection, because currently our mind streams and those of sentient beings are not yet completely unified. Without being unified, they are sentient beings, and I am me. There is a barrier like the king of mountains between us. Therefore, we cannot have great compassion of the same body. Thus, such an Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva is perfectly complete in both wisdom and compassion. At that time, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva said, "World-honored one, because I had made offerings to the Thus Come One who hears the cries of the world, I received from that Thus Come One a hidden transmission of a Vajra-like Samadhi." And he said, "Because I made offerings to the Thus Come One who hears the cries of the world, I received the blessings of this Thus Come One, and ultimately what was transmitted to me, this dreamlike and illusion-like perfuming of hearing, this dreamlike and illusion-like wisdom of hearing, as well as the dreamlike and illusion-like practice of hearing." And this means that this nature of hearing, which appears yet lacks inherent existence, and whose essence is emptiness, is first the wisdom of hearing, then comes the practice of hearing. After this hearing, its very nature, the nature of hearing, is actually neither separate from nor conjoined with the practice. Therefore, even in our worldly context, we say that hearing, contemplating, and practicing must be employed together and cannot be separated. Within hearing there is practice, and within practice there is hearing. Only this is true hearing, contemplating, and practicing. In the past there was a Yugilama who said, "Hearing and contemplating are like 2 horses scratching each other's itches." You might not know this, but generally, when horses scratch each other, they have an innate instinct. If one scratches the upper part, the other horse will also scratch your upper part. Both of them do this mutually. Perhaps you have never herded horses before, so you might not necessarily know this, but this is an analogy used by certain masters in Tibetan Buddhism. Hearing and contemplating mutually benefit and reinforce each other. That is the meaning. It is the same here. In the realization of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, within illusion-like hearing there is the essence of practice, and within practice there is the essence of hearing. Thus, this is an indestructible and extremely subtle state. This is the Vajra-like Samadhi. This is the great Shurangama Samadhi, which is exceptionally sublime. At that time, relying on it, he broke through the subtle layers of ignorance, such that my power of compassion became the same as the Buddha's. I was then able to go to all lands and appear in 32 forms that respond to what beings require, because of this compassionate power that is of the same body as the Buddha's. Because of this power, he has manifestation bodies, 32 forms, taking 32 manifestation forms to enter different lands and benefit sentient beings. Including Master Chang Shui, many have explained that fundamentally Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva's liberation of sentient beings is immeasurable and boundless. Just as the Avatamsaka Sutra says, the Buddha's manifestation bodies are immeasurable and boundless. They are immeasurable, boundless, and countless. However, this is a general categorization. The general categorization primarily consists of these 32 forms. This is also found in our Universal Door chapter, as well as in some other sutras. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva's 32 responsive manifestations are present. In Han Buddhism, including some shrine halls and some main halls, these are depicted. Including in some Guanyin halls, the 32 responsive manifestations of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva are all painted there. Therefore everyone should know, and if you see them in the future, it will also help you generate faith. Now regarding the following 32 responsive manifestations, there are 32 responsive manifestations in total, but the main categories here are sages and ordinary beings. There are 4 sages and 28 ordinary beings. Then, among the ordinary beings, his manifestations as celestial beings number 7, there are 12 human forms, and regarding dragons and others, there are 7 forms here. Among the others, the 8 classes of gods and dragons are all included. There are also ordinary people, as well as non-humans. These are the main categories below. There is a total of 32 forms. First, he speaks of the 4 sages here, where he uses the form of a sage to liberate them. World-honored one, suppose there are bodhisattvas who have entered Samadhi and have advanced in their practice such that they are free from outflows. If these bodhisattvas wish to reach a more sublime understanding, I will appear to them as a Buddha, and I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to liberation. At that time, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva said to the Buddha, "If there are bodhisattvas who wish to enter Samadhi and practice the Dharma that is free from outflows, in this way they can actualize the most supreme state in view. To help them actualize and perfect this, then, because the bodhisattvas mentioned here are either bodhisattvas at the end of the 10th bhumi, or manifesting in the form of a Buddha, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, before these bodhisattvas, especially like 10th bhumi or 9th bhumi bodhisattvas. For these bodhisattvas, it is impossible for a first bhumi bodhisattva to liberate them, therefore he manifests the body of a Buddha, to speak to them about the Dharma of the fruition, allowing them to attain liberation. This is what Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva means by manifesting in the form of a Buddha to liberate sentient beings. Then among the sages just mentioned, the second is suppose there are sages who still need instruction, but who have quieted their minds and have gained wondrous insight. If they wish to attain a more sublime and wondrous understanding, I will appear to them as a solitary sage who has reached enlightenment on his own, and I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to liberation. If there are some sages still needing instruction, who prefer tranquility, who actualize the wondrous, enlightened mind in tranquility, and regarding this most profound state, if they wish to actualize and perfect it, I will manifest before them as a Pratyeka Buddha. Below this, there is the solitary sage enlightened by conditions. The difference between a Pratyeka Buddha and that one is, a Pratyeka Buddha is like the rhinoceros horn-like solitary realizer. Master Chang Shui also explained it this way. The Tibetan translation also uses the rhinoceros horn analogy, because among solitary realizers there is one type that is gregarious, right? Yes, gregarious solitary realizers live among groups. The other type is the rhinoceros horn-like solitary realizer, who is solitary. When a Buddha has not appeared in the world, they attain realization on their own by contemplating dependent origination. So before them, those who love tranquility and often like to do retreats, before these beings, a solitary realizer suddenly arrives, a manifestation of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, to speak the Dharma to you and then leads them to liberation. Among these 4 sages, the text always says, lead them to liberation. Later on it says, lead them to fulfillment. So between liberation and fulfillment, there is indeed a difference in the terminology used. Suppose there are sages who still need instruction, but who have broken free of the links in the chain of dependent co-arising. Because they have broken free, their transcendent nature appears. If they wish to attain a more sublime and wondrous understanding, I will appear to them as a solitary sage, who has become enlightened through the contemplation of the conditioned world, and I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to liberation. This is the third one among the sages. If there are some sages still needing instruction who contemplate the 12 links of dependent origination and sever them, and after breaking free from the 12 links of dependent origination, they attain this supreme and wondrous state and wish to actualize and perfect it, I will manifest before them in the form of a solitary sage enlightened by conditions. This is the gregarious solitary sage just mentioned, or a solitary sage in an assembly, existing among groups. They also exist when a Buddha appears in the world. Usually when a Buddha appears in the world, there will also be such solitary sages. Then he speaks the Dharma to them to lead them to liberation. Of course, for Pratyeka Buddhas, some sutras say that the way Pratyeka Buddhas speak the Dharma is not spoken from the mouth. Their bodies manifest various signs, for example, the upper body bursting into flames or raining down water, and through such various methods they speak the Dharma, thereby leading them to liberation. Then the fourth, suppose there are sages who still need instruction, but whose minds dwell in emptiness, in accordance with the teaching of the Four Noble Truths, as they practice on the path that leads to nirvana. If they wish to attain a more sublime understanding, I will appear to them as a hearer of the teaching, and I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to liberation. If some learn through the Four Noble Truths of suffering, origin, cessation, and path, and ultimately seek nirvana, realizing that the essence of the Four Noble Truths is emptiness, and eventually practice to reach cessation, in order to actualize this state, I will manifest before them in the form of a Sravaka, an Arhat. Then I will speak the Dharma to them, allowing them to attain liberation. These are the four sages. Just now the Buddha, or rather the Bodhisattva here, did not mention using Pratyeka Buddhas, solitary sages and Sravakas to liberate sentient beings. These are the four forms. Then below are the celestial beings. Didn't we just mention celestial beings? There are 7 among the celestial beings. First it speaks of Brahma. Suppose further that there are beings who clearly understand the desires of the mind, do not engage in the activities of desire, and wish to have bodies that are pure. I will appear to them as a Brahma king, and I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to liberation. Here it says liberation. Below this they all say fulfillment. Brahma has the ability to lead them to liberation, right? It says, if sentient beings want to immediately sever their desires and ultimately attain enlightenment, not violating any precepts within the desire realm, and wishing for their body and mind to attain purity, I will manifest before them as a Brahma king, and then speak the Dharma to them, allowing them to attain liberation. Our Bodhisattva precepts also state this, don't they? If one does not sever lust, it obstructs even rebirth in the Brahma heaven, let alone attaining Bodhi. If our sexual desires are not severed, then even rebirth in the Brahma heaven is obstructed, much less attaining Bodhi. Therefore this is manifested in the form of Brahma. Next is Lord Sakra. To beings who desire to be celestial lords and to govern the heavens, I will appear as Lord Sakra, and I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If some sentient beings wish to become the celestial lord, the ruler of the heaven of the 33, the celestial lord governing the heaven of the 33, I will manifest before them as Lord Sakra. Then I will teach them the 10 virtuous actions and such dharmas, and ultimately allow them to achieve their fulfillment. This is the second one, Lord Sakra. Then below is the heaven of delight in creating. To beings who wish for a body that has the freedom and ease to roam throughout the 10 directions, I will appear as the Lord of the heaven of delight in creating, and I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If some sentient beings wish to obtain this kind and to obtain freedom and ease for themselves, allowing them to roam through the 10 directions, throughout the 6 heavens of the desire realm and the 4 great continents, wanting to go everywhere. I will manifest before them the body of the Lord of the heaven of delight in creating. Then I will speak the Dharma to them to lead them to fulfillment. To beings who wish for a body that has the freedom and ease, this is the heaven of pleasure derived from what others create, to fly through space. I will appear as the Lord of the heaven of pleasure derived from what others create. I will instruct these gods in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If some sentient beings wish to attain the state of the great sovereign heaven, there is a difference between the heaven of delight in creating and the heaven of pleasure derived from what others create, and they wish to roam across the entire 3,000-fold great thousand-world system, as well as the form realm, the 4 dhyana heavens of the form realm. If they constantly wish to fly through these places, I will manifest before them as the great sovereign heaven. Then I will speak the Dharma to them, allowing them to achieve fulfillment. Below is the great celestial general, to beings who would like to govern ghosts and spirits. In order to protect their countries, I will appear as a great celestial general. I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If some sentient beings wish to govern the ghosts and spirits throughout the world, the governance here generally refers to the 18 classes of ghosts and spirits, the 18 classes of celestial beings. If they wish to govern these, I will manifest before them as this kind of celestial general. Then I will speak the Dharma to them and lead them to fulfillment. Then below is the 6th, the 4 celestial kings. To beings who would like to rule a world in order to protect its inhabitants, I will appear as one of the 4 celestial kings. I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If some sentient beings hope to rule our entire world of the 4 great continents and to constantly protect its inhabitants, then I will manifest before them as one of the 4 celestial kings, and speak the Dharma to them to lead them to fulfillment. Therefore, every single manifestation of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva here, his genuinely manifested identity, is truly remarkable. Beyond what our physical eyes can see, throughout the celestial realms, likely the form realm heavens and the desire realm heavens, including everything above the 4 celestial kings, he manifests in this way. Then the 7th, the princes of the 4 celestial kings, he transforms like this. To beings who would like to be born into a celestial palace and to command ghosts and spirits, I will appear as a prince of one of the 4 celestial kingdoms. I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If they like to be born in a celestial palace and command these ghosts and spirits, perhaps the 4 great princes, the princes of the 4 celestial kings, do not have as much power as the 4 celestial kings themselves. I will manifest before them as a prince of the 4 celestial kings. Then I will speak the Dharma to them, allowing them to attain fulfillment. This was regarding the celestial beings. For Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, there are 4 forms of sages, and for celestial beings there are 7 different identities of celestial beings. So these responsive manifestations cover this. Next, for us humans, the manifestations as humans, there are 12 human forms in total. He can also manifest these among humans. To beings who would like to be kings among people, I will appear as a human king. I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If some sentient beings particularly like human kings, leaders, noblemen, people with power, in that case, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva often manifests before us in the form of a human king. Therefore, for leaders of various countries, it is hard to say. We don't know if they are Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva or not. Some leader whom we often find objectionable might actually turn out to be Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva right there. The form of a human king, he manifests as a human king, to speak the Dharma to them and lead them to fulfillment. Then the 2nd, an elder, to beings who would like to be heads of clans and would like to command everyone's respect and deference. I will appear as an elder, and I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If some sentient beings particularly like noble lineages, wealthy and powerful families, or people with great merit, and are highly respected by the world, in this case I will manifest before them as an elder, a patron, a wealthy person, or a person with great merit. Some of us are relatively influential people, so they would especially like this. Some people particularly like wise people. However, at Larungar, it seems that no matter how wealthy someone is, they are not necessarily highly regarded. It is not like worldly people. I always feel that the values at Larungar are somewhat different from many worldly values. For worldly people, if someone is a very tough fighter, perhaps everyone will respect them. But here, if someone is a tough fighter, they might be expelled, who knows? If someone is exceptionally wealthy, showing off their extreme wealth, since everyone here is a practitioner, it is not necessarily viewed as a merit. If someone is particularly good-looking, they won't necessarily receive everyone's in our worldly society. Being ugly or having physical disabilities often leads to being bullied. So this is somewhat different from the secular world. It is a different kind of community. You will gradually come to understand this yourself. So if someone likes such an elder, he will transform into the identity of an elder to speak the Dharma. His speaking of the Dharma here does not necessarily mean lecturing on the Four Noble Truths, the Four Immeasurables, or Dogchen. He might, through this person's identity, interact with them frequently and gradually help you become tamed and transformed. Regarding speaking the Dharma here, every instance of speaking the Dharma might not necessarily be like us having to sit on a Dharma throne or giving a very formal Dharma lecture, not necessarily. Because some elders, kings, and people like them are not themselves Dharma teachers. So if they were to start giving formal teachings, everyone would probably feel it was quite strange. Then the third one, he transforms into, here it says a lay person, but under lay person there are also, it probably means practitioners, yogis, or those practicing in solitary places. To beings who would like to be able to discuss celebrated writings and to live a pure life, I will appear as a layperson and will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If some people particularly like to discuss celebrated writings, discuss worldly fame in this way and live a pure life, they themselves might. Is it being indifferent to fame or discussing writings? They love to discuss, to converse about it, right? And live a pure life. If they are willing to live in pure, secluded places, I will manifest before them as such a practitioner, or a layperson, a yogi, a renunciate. Using this identity, I will speak the Dharma to them and lead them to fulfillment. The fourth is a minister of state. He transforms into these, to beings who would like to govern a country, or to decide the affairs of a province or a district. I will appear as a minister of state, and I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If some sentient beings like to govern the country, perhaps analyzing and judging, including matters between provinces and districts, handling various lawsuits and disputes, if they are able to handle and judge them, they will decide. So before these sentient beings I manifest as an official, a minister, a magistrate. If some sentient beings like to govern, I manifest before them as someone holding an official position, but not as high as a king. Using these identities, I speak the Dharma to them to lead them to fulfillment. Then the next one is some worldly numerologists. What is this? To beings who would like to employ numerology and other esoteric disciplines out of a wish to protect and nurture themselves. I will appear as a Brahmin, and I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If some sentient beings particularly like astronomy and geography, or calculations of yin-yang and calendars, including divination and various fortune-telling methods, to protect and nurture themselves, should refer to our frequent practice of cultivating the body and mind, including a strong emphasis on personal health, This includes worldly medical sciences as well as modern worldly practices for preserving health. In that case, I will manifest before them as a Brahmin. Brahmins understand everything. The Brahmin caste is very intelligent, especially in the secular world. There are 18 great fields of study. Many of these 18 great fields of study correspond to our current medical sciences and arts and crafts. Therefore, through this method, I speak the Dharma to them and lead them to fulfillment. To men who would like to learn about becoming a monk and about observing the monastic precepts and regulations, I will appear as a monk and I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If there are men who wish to become monks and observe these bhikshu precepts, observing the 250 precepts, I will manifest the form of a bhikshu before them to speak the Dharma to them. Otherwise, if someone wants to become a monk but has no preceptor and there is no bhikshu sangha, they cannot receive the vows. Thus he manifests as a bhikshu before them. Then the seventh is, to women who would like to learn about becoming a nun and about observing the monastic precepts and regulations, I will appear as a nun and I will instruct them in dharmas that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If there are women who wish to become nuns and observe the pure precepts, the 360 precepts, Avalokiteshvara says, I will manifest before her in the form of a bhikshuni. Then I will speak the Dharma to her to lead her to fulfillment. Then the eighth among human forms, to men who would like to observe the 5 precepts of the laity, I will appear as a precepted layman, and I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If there are men who wish to observe the 5 precepts, the 3 refuges and the 5 precepts, in that case I will manifest before them as an upasaka, which is the form of a male lay practitioner, to speak the Dharma to them and lead them to fulfillment. Actually, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva constantly accords with sentient beings. If someone can be liberated by a monk, he manifests as a monk before them to be their companion. If they are like nuns, he manifests as a nun before them. So some of us ask, is Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva male, or is he actually female? He can miraculously manifest as anything, as long as it liberates sentient beings. Manifesting in whatever form is needed to liberate them is possible. Then the 9th, to women who would like to ground themselves on the 5 precepts of the laity, I will appear as a precepted laywoman, and I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If there are those who wish to observe the 5 precepts, women who wish to take the 5 precepts, I will manifest the identity of a female lay practitioner before her, to speak the Dharma to her and lead her to fulfillment. The 10th, to virtuous women of high standing who would like to manage the affairs of a household or of a country, I will appear as a queen, or as the wife of a lord, or else as some other noble woman, and I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. For some women who are situated in administrative or governing positions, in this regard, some are born with a love for studying politics and governing a country, and for some, through their own ways they can manage a country or a household. For them, in this case, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva manifests a queen's body before them. A queen is equivalent to an empress or a female president. Today, many countries in the world have female prime ministers and female presidents. We have these also the wife of a lord, such as the first lady of a country. And as for other noble women, these refer to wives of ministers and other highly respected women. Those who receive, for example, not the highest leaders of a country, but other highly respected female leaders, wise women or scholars. This also includes some accomplished practitioners. There are many exceptionally remarkable women as well. If there are women who need to be liberated in this way, he will assume this form to speak the Dharma to them and lead them to fulfillment. Then the 11th, to young men who wish to remain celibate, I will appear as a pure young man, and I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If there are men who do not wish to defile their bodies and minds, always resting in purity, some might have been monks since childhood. Even if they are not Buddhist monastics, in Brahmanism and other traditions, there are those who remain pure their whole lives. In that case, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva manifests before them, also manifesting as a pure young man. He uses this pure body to travel alongside them and speaks the Dharma to lead them to fulfillment. This is the 11th, the last one among human forms. To young women who wish to remain celibate, never to be violated, I will appear as a pure young woman, and I will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If there are young women who cherish their purity, just like the pure young men mentioned earlier, remaining unstained by worldly life, untainted by impure phenomena, and continue to live purely like this, they do not wish to be violated and do not seek marriage. In that case, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva manifests before them as a pure young woman to speak the Dharma and lead them to fulfillment. We just covered the 12 human forms. Next, there are 7 forms among the 8 classes of gods and dragons. To celestial beings who no longer wish to be celestial beings, I will appear in celestial form and will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If there are celestial beings who wish to leave their celestial lives and no longer wish to be celestial beings, in that case Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva manifests in a celestial form, speaks the Dharma to them, teaching the 37 factors of enlightenment, and thereby leads them to fulfillment. To dragons who no longer wish to be dragons, I will appear as a dragon and will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. The second is dragons. As we discussed earlier, there are many kinds of dragons, the 4 types of dragons and so on. So if there are dragons that wish to leave the dragon realm and no longer wish to live among dragons, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva will manifest as a dragon in the form of a dragon king and speak the Dharma to them to lead them to fulfillment. Later on, among the 8 classes of gods and dragons, many of them no longer wish to remain in the form of their own kind. If they no longer wish to live like that, he uses these specific forms to liberate them. To yaksas, for the third one, to yaksas who wish to be free of being yaksas, I will appear as a yaksa and will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If there are yaksas who also wish to leave behind their life as a yaksa or this kind of identity, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva will manifest before them in the form of a yaksa, speaking the Dharma to lead them to fulfillment. In fact, His Holiness also said in the past, if we want to liberate sentient beings, our own identity is very important. For example, if we want to liberate lay people, it is actually quite difficult for monastics to do so. They might feel some of them have this kind of fear. If one truly wants to liberate lay people, having a lay identity might be a bit better. Otherwise, between the monastic and the lay person, there is no common language and no shared life experiences. Without shared life experiences, it can sometimes be very difficult to liberate them. For those who have made greater aspirations, it is relatively easier for a monastic to liberate another monastic because they share the same aspirations and path. It is easier. For example, I am a monastic Dharma teacher. If I expound the sutras and speak the Dharma to monastics, it might be a bit more convenient. But if I speak to lay people, some lay people will think, oh, it is wonderful to meet a monastic. Those with pure faith are fine with it. But another part of the people will think, oh, he is different from me. He is a monastic. He is just one of those bald-headed sramanas. He starts bragging every day, while we lay people have to deal with all the rules and ups and downs of daily life. How can I listen to him? So sometimes it is also not easy to liberate them. Therefore here, look at Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when liberating beings like dragons, yaksas, gandharvas and so on, he takes on their identities to speak the Dharma to them, so they can leave those identities. Here in this text it is basically like this as well. Then before the yaksas he speaks the Dharma in this way to lead them to fulfillment. Then the fourth, to Gandharvas who wish to be free of being Gandharvas, I will appear as a Gandharva, and will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If there are Gandharvas who also wish to be free from their identity as Gandharvas, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva manifests in the body of a Gandharva, and then speaks the Dharma to them, leading them to fulfillment. Then the fifth is the Asuras. To Asuras who wish to be free of being Asuras, I will appear as an Asura, and will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If Asuras also wish to leave behind their identity as Asuras, then Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva manifests in the identity of an Asura to speak the Dharma to them, so they may attain fulfillment. The sixth is the Kinnaras. To Kinnaras who wish to be free of being Kinnaras, I will appear as a Kinnara, and will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If there are some Kinnaras who wish to be free of their identity, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva before them manifests in the identity of a Kinnara to speak the Dharma to them and lead them to fulfillment. Then the Maharagas who wish to be free of being Maharagas, I will appear as a Maharaga and will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. As we mentioned earlier, if they wish to leave behind being Maharagas, he will also manifest before them as a Maharaga and then speak the Dharma to lead them to fulfillment. Additionally, in the Universal Door chapter, the Garudas are mentioned. If a Garuda wishes to as a Garuda, if it wishes to leave the identity of a Garuda, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva will also manifest in the form of a Garuda, speaking the Dharma to it to lead it to fulfillment. There is also the Vajrapani form. In some other texts from the past, when speaking of the 32 responsive manifestations, there is the Vajrapani form. If there are beings who like this form, he will also use this identity to liberate sentient beings, and so on. There are forms like this. These are from the 8 classes of gods and dragons just mentioned. Here, only 7 classes of gods and dragons are listed. All 8 are not mentioned. There are only 7. Then below it says, if they are ordinary beings, to beings who enjoy being human and who wish to continue as humans, I will appear in human form and will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If there are some people who like to be an ordinary, average, worldly person, in that case, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva will also manifest as one of them and then speak the Dharma. Then below are the non-human beings, those other than humans. This meaning is perhaps quite broad. Some Dharma masters say that it does not mention beings of the 3 lower realms here, but actually regarding beings of the 3 lower realms, in other accounts that tell the life stories of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva in the hells among hungry ghosts and among animals, he also uses various forms to liberate sentient beings. It just doesn't explicitly state here that in the hells he takes the identity of hell beings, among hungry ghosts he takes the identity of hungry ghosts, or among animals he takes the identity of animals. It doesn't say that. But here, non-humans actually covers a relatively broad scope to non-human beings, whether they have bodies or are bodiless, to whether they are capable of cognition or are not capable of cognition, who wish to be free of being non-human. I will appear to them as they are and will instruct them in the Dharma that will lead them to fulfillment of their wish. If they are beings other than humans, some have forms, having physical bodies. Some are formless without physical bodies, which we completely cannot see, like those in the formless realm, or among sentient beings, some are completely invisible, formless. Some are capable of cognition, many within the 3 realms who have thoughts and feelings, including some sentient beings in the solitary hells. In that case, like bridges, rocks, and various insentient objects, they have no cognition. For all these various sentient beings, if they wish to leave their current identities, then Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva will also manifest in their respective forms. For example, if there is a sentient being as a rock, and this rock sentient being wishes to leave this kind of what appears to be an insentient existence, but if this sentient being is to be liberated, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, having an affinity with it, will use a relatively similar form to liberate it. He will speak the Dharma to it, to lead it to fulfillment. So regarding speaking the Dharma here, we quoted a scriptural evidence earlier, stating that the content of the Dharma is quite extensive. It can involve 10 aspects. I think it is in the Extraordinary Words or something similar, which mentions 10 aspects, such as the object of knowledge, the path, the mental state, nirvana, and many others. Therefore here, when we talk about speaking the Dharma, we might think we must give a formal Buddhist teaching. But in reality, for some sentient beings, they indirectly rely on this to attain liberation. Yet it may not look like a formal Buddhist teaching. For example, if I want to liberate a sparrow, when I chirp tweet, 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 together with the sparrow, it doesn't necessarily mean I am immediately teaching it about non-self emptiness or impermanence, not necessarily. But by using its language, I plant the seed of liberation within its mind stream, so it will gradually enter the path to liberation. This should be the case. The manifestations of many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas come in all sorts of varieties. Otherwise, look at the 6 munis. When they go into the realms of hells and hungry ghosts, where is there such an occasion for a formal Dharma lecture? There isn't any. For Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when liberating beings in the 6 destinies, when going to liberate them, sometimes there is absolutely no occasion to give formal teachings. But he relies on his power to be able to liberate sentient beings. Therefore, for ourselves as well, when liberating sentient beings in the future, if we possess a kind heart, as His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche spoke of yesterday, a particularly kind heart, then you do not necessarily have to perform some religious ritual for them. But relying on your kind heart, if you can lead them to abandon evil and do good, this is actually a true turning of the Dharma wheel in practical action. This is very important. The speaking the Dharma, mentioned here, of course, after we have studied this, we see Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva uses various forms to teach according to beings' capacities. We can do the same. Although our bodies now might not be able to turn into a celestial being one moment and a dragon the next, this is not possible. But before the sentient beings we come into contact with, we can still do this. For example, when I meet a doctor, I can use the medical knowledge I understand to chat with him a bit. When I meet a police officer, I use some principles relevant to police officers. Although I do not have abilities like Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattvas, I still like, in the process of interacting with different people, to try my best first to appeal to their interests, and at the same time reach a consensus with them. Then, once they have accepted me, I can proceed to slowly speak the Dharma to them. Or, even if only for a brief moment, I bring them inner peace. I think this is also a very good method. We absolutely must not, for example, if someone specializing in architecture comes, and we as monastics say, studying architecture is just conceptual thinking, you shouldn't study it anymore. It creates bad karma. You are slandering the Tathagata's teachings. The Buddha said everything is empty, but you are seeing things as not empty. What is the use of this or that architecture? If you act like this, the other person will immediately generate wrong views and malicious thoughts. In fact, people nowadays, their minds are very fragile. In a very short amount of time they can be happy, and they can also be in pain, they can laugh, and they can also cry, they can be joyous, and they can also be heartbroken. They can do meaningful things, and they can also do meaningless things. The mindsets of many of us are in a state that can change constantly at any moment. It's not that everyone has a relatively fixed set of values of their own, where they remain unshaken no matter what you say to them. It is not like that. In today's world, especially in this internet age, the human mind is not like the minds of people in the past, which were relatively pure, simple, and stable. It is not like that. They are always, just a few words can change them. At such times, if your way of speaking the Dharma to others is slightly off and hits their sore spot, from then on, they might generate complete wrong views about this and never study it again. As for our Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, he accords with sentient beings, manifesting his body in various ways. However, for us to completely manifest our bodies, to immediately manifest upon meeting someone, is a bit difficult. But at least I think when we encounter people, for instance, if you go to Africa, you consider what the habits and interests of Africans are. If you go to Europe, what are Europeans like? If you go to the Tibetan region, what are Tibetan people like? If you go elsewhere, what are their customs and hobbies? What are their traditions? What are their habitual tendencies and flaws? What do they like? If you know these things, then you yourself can also, just like an actor who can immediately act as a demon one moment and act as a celestial maiden the next. She can transform into anything. Therefore, if we are a truly skillful and compassionate angel liberating sentient beings, they can be ready at any moment. A kind heart must certainly be the foundation, otherwise it is just called deceiving people, or a kind of technique which is not very good. But if I single-mindedly wish to help others, on one hand, I need to know that if I don't speak well this time, the other person might never receive the benefit. But if my method is right, I might be able to eradicate the other person's afflictions. So this is extremely crucial. Therefore, through this, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva's 32 responsive manifestations, although our bodies cannot transform like that right now, at least in terms of skillfully benefiting sentient beings, everyone should not be so rigid. I also mentioned in class once, sometimes when we are in front of different people, we should say different things and understand different situations. There is a worldly saying that goes, speak human language to humans, speak ghost language to ghosts. But this is a derogatory term, actually regarding the skillful means of bodhisattvas. Indeed, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva might look. When meeting humans, he takes human forms, 12 kinds of humans. When meeting the 8 classes of gods and dragons, he takes their forms. And when meeting celestial beings, there are also so many of their forms. So sometimes we look and see, to benefit different sentient beings, do not just hit them with a stick right at the beginning. That will immediately make them lose hope. Acting like that is probably incorrect. Those of us who understand a little bit of Buddhism shouldn't say right at the start, when someone is just beginning to study Buddhism, "Hey, look, this is wrong, you are breaking precepts. This creates bad karma. This is not allowed. It is normal for them to make mistakes or break precepts." Don't we often see, when some officials smoke, in such situations I say, right, it's fine, go ahead and smoke. The other day, an official from our area, he wasn't being disrespectful. He started arranging things with the subordinate officials. You go communicate with that Khenpo, and you go to those old women and communicate with them. Originally, this phrase sounds very harsh, right? But what he actually meant was to communicate with the few Khenpos. Right. But regarding such language, actually, sometimes we don't say, you are creating bad karma like this, you can't address them like this, it's disrespectful. Sometimes they certainly don't mean it intentionally. Even if it is intentional, it's fine. Sometimes with certain words, in different occasions, they might use them correctly or they might use them incorrectly. But regardless, we still must have a kind heart of our own to treat others. This is very important. So finally it says here, "These are the 32 pure and wondrous forms in which I appear in all lands in order to respond to what beings require. I accomplish this in Samadhi, which I enter by redirecting my faculty of hearing inward to merge with the enlightened nature of hearing within, until the wondrous power of my self-mastery becomes effortless." Then here, regarding what we discussed earlier, these so-called manifestations mentioned above are all the 32 pure and wondrous responsive manifestations. He enters into different lands and manifests different identities. These are all, in fact, relying on this samadhi, the perfuming and practice of hearing just mentioned. They manifest within this effortless wondrous function, achieved with self-mastery, within his effortless wondrous power. We often say that wisdom is without exertion, and through its wondrous power it manifests various kinds of play, like a dream and an illusion, benefiting immeasurable and boundless sentient beings. Just as a lotus flower is not wetted by water, and just as the sun and moon do not abide in space, Bodhisattvas act in this way, freely and effortlessly soaring through space, benefiting immeasurable and boundless sentient beings. This is the action of a bodhisattva. Therefore, in the end, we can say effortless wondrous power, achieved with self-mastery. This year, for our teaching of the Shurangama Sutra, I hope that everyone's practice will also be an effortless wondrous power, achieved with self-mastery. And everyone's activity of liberating sentient beings should also be like this. With that being said, currently we have gone through more than half of each Dharma text. In our Vinaya, it should be in the root text of the Treasury of Qualities. What does it mean? It means that if it is more than half done, it is considered completed or successful. Generally, in the Tibetan region, in folklore there are such sayings, His Holiness also, every time he gave a teaching, "Oh, whatever Dharma we are teaching, it is over halfway done, so there will be no problems from now on." There is such a saying. So it is also for the sake of an auspicious connection that we brought this Shurangama Sutra. Although this might from 2019 to now, it has been several years, and we paused for a period in between. I hope that in the future, relying on the blessings of the Dharma protectors, and the blessing power of all the Sangha, we can also perfect the remaining parts of the Shurangama Sutra within this lifetime. As long as we are alive, everyone should make this aspiration. So at the very end, relying on Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva's 32 responsive manifestations, may we achieve effortless wondrous power and self-mastery. This is an aspiration of ours, and also an auspicious connection.
Bandara Bandara